On the 26th of December 1900, a supply vessel called the Hesperus approached the Flannan Isles, a remote cluster of rocks off the western coast of Scotland, 12 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean. The journey was routine. The crew was bringing supplies and a relief keeper to the lighthouse on Eilean Moor. But as the Hesperus drew closer, the relief captain noticed something wrong immediately. The lighthouse light wasn't running. It hadn't been running for 11 days. The crew sounded the horn. No response. They fired a flare. Nothing. One of the men rowed ashore and climbed the steep path to the lighthouse. The gate was closed but unlocked. The entrance door was also unlocked. He called out. No answer. Inside, he found something that would disturb investigators and historians for over a century. The table was set for a meal. Food was still on the plates. A chair had been knocked over near the table, as if someone had stood up suddenly and left in a hurry. The clock on the wall had stopped. The beds were made. Everything was in its place. But the three lighthouse keepers were gone. James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, completely and utterly gone. No bodies, no note, no distress signal, no sign of struggle. The lighthouse door had been locked from the outside. An investigation was launched immediately. The lighthouse log became the centre of everything. The final entries told a deeply unsettling story. December 12th. James Ducat wrote that the wind was severe and that all three men had been very quiet all day. He noted that both Thomas Marshall and Donald MacArthur had been crying. Grown men, experienced sailors, crying. December 13th. Another entry. The storm was still raging. Ducat wrote that all three men had been praying. December 15th. The final entry. It read simply, storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all. Here is what made investigators stop cold. There was no storm on December 12th, 13th or 15th. Weather records confirmed it. The sea around the Flannan Isles was calm during those dates. Ships in the area reported normal conditions. So what storm were they writing about? What were three experienced men so terrified of that they wept and prayed for days? While the sea outside was completely still. And then, on the day the log recorded calm seas and the peace of God, they were gone. Theories have circulated for over 100 years. The most widely accepted explanation is that a rogue wave struck the island while the men were working outside on the equipment. A rogue wave, a sudden massive wall of water that appears without warning, even in calm conditions, could have swept all three men off the rocks and into the ocean in seconds. Evidence supports this partially. Investigators found damage to equipment stored near the cliff edge. Something with enormous force had struck that part of the island. But it doesn't explain the log entries. If the sea was calm for those 3 days, what were they afraid of? Why were hardened men weeping and praying? And why does the final entry sound less like a factual record and more like a farewell? Other theories have been darker. Some researchers believe one of the men snapped under the isolation. That violence occurred on the island, and the remaining men and any evidence went into the sea. The overturned chair, the abandoned meal, the emotional log entries. The fact that MacArthur was outside with the others. Why was he outside? Nobody knows. Some have suggested the men witnessed something at sea, something that terrified them enough to drive them outside in a panic, and that whatever it was took them. Others have pointed to the strange and specific phrasing of that final log entry. God is over all, as the words of a man who knew something was coming and had made his peace with it. James Ducat was 43 years old. He had worked lighthouses for 20 years. Thomas Marshall was experienced and highly regarded. Donald MacArthur was a veteran keeper. These were not men who panicked easily. These were not men who cried over nothing. These were not men who abandoned their post. Yet on a calm December night in 1900, all three of them walked out of a locked lighthouse and into the darkness of the North Atlantic, and none of them were ever seen again. The Flannan Isles lighthouse still stands today. It was automated in 1971 and no longer requires keepers. The island is uninhabited. The rocks where the three men likely stood for the last time are still there, battered by the same ocean that has kept their secret for over 120 years. What did James Duckett, Thomas Marshall and Donald MacArthur see in those final days? What storm came for them that left no trace on any weather record? And why does that last log entry read like a goodbye? Nobody knows, and the lighthouse on Island Moor isn't telling.